Are you a smoker? Are you smoking? Are you trying to quit? Are you thinking about vaping? Oh, that's just as bad as smoking. No, it's not. In fact, there's some new evidence that vaping, while it's not necessarily good for you, it is preferable to smoking. It can help you quit smoking. It's helped a lot of people do so. Talking about vaping as an alternative to smoking. If your kids are smoking and they say, you know what, I'm going to try and quit smoking, I'm going to turn to vaping. Oh, why not? 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. Are you a vapor? Do people give you a hard time for vaping? You're getting tired of people jumping on your case about it, saying it's just as bad as smoking. Well, it's not. New study out by the Centers for Disease Control, defying their own data, even as they come out with evidence that vaping can help you quit smoking, they still insist on preaching to you about it and trying to tell you shouldn't do it, zero tolerance and all that business. Remember Breathe ND? Well, they ceased to exist in North Dakota. Goodbye, good riddance. They contributed absolutely nothing constructive to the smoking debate. If you're a smoker and you want to quit, here's what you need to know. If you switch to vaping, you'll be doing better than you are now. That's what you need to know. So why not? It's better than smoking. Not as good as... vaping is not as good as not vaping, but it's a hell of a lot better than smoking full-on tobacco. Why do people seem to have a problem with that? Number 663-1270. Here's the story. This comes from our friends at Reason.com, the Reason Foundation, publishers of Reason Magazine. It's a very reasonable publication. They have a lot of very reasonable articles. Between 2011 and 2016, according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey, the share of high school students who reported smoking cigarettes in the previous month fell from almost 16% to 8%. Even as past month use of e-cigarettes rose dramatically. In other words, these kids in high school, your kids in a lot of cases, they're switching from cigarettes to e-cigarettes. They're switching from smoking to vaping. Now, why is that a bad thing? It's not, except unless, of course, you're a member of a group like Breathe ND or the Centers for Disease Control, who have adopted a zero-tolerance policy, because God forbid we should ever say that smoking might not be, or vaping might not be as bad for you as something else. Realistically, you're human, right? You want to quit, but maybe you're not ready to go full turkey. Switch to vaping. Seems pretty obvious, but again, the war on tobacco people don't seem to get it. As vaping has exploded among teenagers, smoking has fallen by half. Now, you would think that a lot of people would consider that to be a good thing, a step in the right direction. But no.
They can't vape. Vaping is just as bad as smoking, and smoking is icky. I know that because Breathe ND told me so. And how would they ever steer you wrong?
Right, yeah. Now, if you want to quit smoking, if you got to take up e-cigarettes to do it, go for it. Do it. It'll help. And at the very least, for the time being, you'll be doing something that's not as bad as actually puffing on a cigarette. Center for Disease Control and the National Youth Tobacco Survey they show a very obvious decline in teenagers smoking. It's undeniable. Now, in theory, it is possible that teenagers smoking would have declined even faster if e-cigarettes had never been introduced. But on the face of it, looking at the trend, vaping up, smoking down, the argument that vaping entices teenagers to take up the nicotine habit and start smoking, it doesn't hold water, or smoke, as the case may be. If anything, it seems the opposite argument is the case. Because the bottom line is this: smoking is far more dangerous than vaping. Yet these groups, like the Centers for Disease Control, they continue to talk about it like there is no difference whatsoever between smoking and vaping as far as your health hazards go. That is simply not true. But that's politics for you. So if you have let's say you have a child or a son or a daughter in high school, they've taken up smoking. They've taken up smoking for the reason that most people take up smoking at that age, not because some cartoon camel told them to. It's another ridiculous argument. No, they take up smoking for the reason adults smoke, to help them deal with the stress of their daily lives. And at some point, you wise up to it. You decide, well, this is not a good thing. I should probably get off of it. Wouldn't you be happy if your kid said, instead of smoking, I've been smoking cigarettes and I want to get away from it, so I'm going to start vaping for a while and see if I can wean myself off of it? Shouldn't that be a good thing to hear from your kids? Well, you would think. But no, it's got to be zero tolerance all the way. It's got to be durable. You can't do anything. Yeah. But come on. Your kids are human beings. You're a human being. It's not about the Marine Corps building men here. It's about getting people away from unhealthy habits as painlessly as possible. If the alternative is just kicking the habit or vaping for a while to kind of wean yourself off of, it seems like the vaping is doing the job. It seems like it's working for people. So what's with all this high and mighty finger wagging about it? Smoking is icky. And the out-and-out lie that vaping is as bad as smoking. Don't believe it. Don't believe it for 1 minute. If you're looking to get off smoking, vaping may not be the healthiest thing in the world for you, but it sure beats the bejabbers out of the alternative. So where's the problem? Love to hear from you on this. 663-1270. Jim Walsh, into the danger zone. On Supertalk 1270, supertalk1270.com, with more conversation and your calls coming up.
Right now, 67.
The Red River Farm Network. Ag News is here on Supertalk 1270.
All right, suppose a family member, loved one, comes to you, let's say a child, maybe grandchild in high school or college, and they say, I want to quit smoking. Can you get me some of these e-cigarettes? The reasoning being, at the very least, while they're trying to kick the nicotine habit, they'll be doing something that is not nearly as harmful as actually smoking. Now, what's wrong with that? Seems like that would be a good thing, a step in the right direction, but no. The Centers for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration, smoking is bad. And they tell you it's an out-and-out lie. They tell you that vaping is just as bad as smoking. Yeah, vaping is not good for you. But if you're smoking and you switch to vaping, how is that not an improvement? It's like Lenny Bruce said, you start applying common sense, and that's when you really get confused. 663-1270, 663-1270. Perhaps you've had some personal experience in this area. You should share your story. Vaping is on the increase among teenagers, but at the same time, smoking is decreasing. That, according to a study from the National Youth Tobacco Survey under the aegis of the Centers for Disease Control. Yet, these same organizations continue to treat the two as if they're exactly the same thing. But listen to this. Comment from one professor at Boston University of the Public Health Department says the rate of decline in youth smoking is unprecedented. This despite, he says, the rapid rise in e-cigarette experimentation. It's simply not consistent with what you've been hearing, the idea that vaping is going to lead you to smoking. It's not a gateway. If anything, it's just the opposite. You take up vaping to get away from smoking. That seems to be what's going on here. But it's not what you're hearing from your great and glorious government bureaucrats. So when the Food and Drug Administration tells you that it's all the same and you shouldn't take up vaping as a means of quitting smoking, are they really helping? No. If you're a smoker, if you're smoking cigarettes, and cigarettes, they suck, all right? Smoking is not a good thing. But at the very least, if you're vaping, if you're doing the e-cigarette thing, or your child or your family member, well, it's a move in the right direction, a move in favor of getting away from it, a move away from the destructive habit that is smoking tobacco. That's something that people just don't get in our modern zero-tolerance society. It has to be all or nothing at all. All or nothing at all. That was a song, wasn't it? Sinatra, yeah. Now you tell me where you stand on this. 663-1270, 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Supertalk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. Yeah, the facts are right here. As vaping has exploded among teenagers, interesting correlation, smoking has fallen by half, according to these figures. Go figure. But no, we can't have that. Because one's just as bad as the other, right? Wrong. All right. Moving on. And speaking of this, it's kind of related to it. The whole notion that there is some kind of stigma that you have to attach to smoking and drugs and everything else. Here's a question for you. Is it really necessary to release all that information about the drugs that were in Carrie Fisher's system when she died? Came out yesterday. You may have seen it. Carrie Fisher from Star Wars fame. She passed away a few months ago. The details on the autopsy came out yesterday. And there were all these articles and all these papers giving all these details about all the pharmaceutical enhancements that were in the woman's body when she died. Why is this really necessary? What purpose does it serve? Really? Can you think of one? 663-1270. As a part of the whole anti-drug zero tolerance thing, somebody trying to teach you a lesson. See, this is what happens to you when you do. Well, look, you and I know drugs are bad. Drugs are bad, okay? Well, they are. Okay, fine. Do you really need to be lectured? Does anybody really need to be lectured about this? And what about the rights of the family? What about the right to privacy of the family? Now, who knows what the law is like in California on this? In North Dakota, interestingly enough, by law in North Dakota, the details of an autopsy can only be disclosed under very specific laid out conditions and can only be done so primarily for the purpose of, specifically for a purpose of prosecution or investigation in a criminal case. In other words, to oversimplify here, if there is no foul play suspected, no disclosure. Every family has one or two people who are kind of messed up chemically. You have them, I have them, we all know somebody. It happens in the best of families. And if something happens to that person and they die for whatever reason, do you really want this information coming out? I don't. If it's somebody in my family, and I have family members like that, you do too. 663-1270. Now, if the family wants to do it, that's one thing. If Carrie Fisher's family wants to come out, and perhaps they have, and they want to come out and say, well, we want you to know that Carrie had these drugs in her body, and we hope that you'll learn a lesson from her life, and you'll get yourself together if you need help to get off of drugs, blah, blah, blah. If they say that, great. But that's the family. If the family says and does that, that's one thing. But where does the state of California or the state of wherever, where does anybody coming off with the idea? There are people who actually think that for some reason they're doing a public service by disclosing all this information. I don't get it. Do you? Who are they really helping here? Is it really necessary for the public good to tell us all about the drugs in Carrie Fisher's system when she died? In the first place, in the case of Carrie Fisher, she was pretty open about her situation. She even made a movie about it. They did a movie. She was not in it. Who was in it? What's her name? Meryl Streep was in the movie that Carrie Fisher wrote, based on a book, I think, about her life dealing with all these issues, these drug issues and alcohol issues. So she was very open about it anyway. So does the government think, does a coroner's office or whoever, do they really think they're doing all of us a big favor by telling, disclosing all this information? What purpose does it serve, whether it's Carrie Fisher or your uncle or your grandchild or your next door neighbor or whoever? What's the point? What is the point of it all? Some interesting comments on this. You can comment, by the way, at the website, supertalk1270.com. Jenny writes, I felt the same about Michael Jackson, particularly the discussions about how his body was disfigured by disease, whatever. Tony J. writes, in case we want to snort her ashes. Thanks, dude. Beverly writes, I said the same thing earlier today. No need to go public. Don't like to say this, but maybe they're trying to shame her even in death. Yeah. Good point. It's the whole war on drugs thing all over again. We got to show people how bad drugs are and shame these people. And if that's what they're trying to do, it's wrong. It's very wrong. More comments about this coming up. Is it really necessary? What public service? What good are they doing for you and your family? Even if you have someone in your family who is dealing with these issues, what good does it do you to tell the whole world about what was in Carrie Fisher's body when she died? I don't. 663-1270, 663-1270. Supertalk 1270, supertalk1270.com. More conversation coming up.
Right now, 67.
News and Views with Joel Heitkamp. Weekdays on Supertalk 1270.
On the table here, vaping instead of smoking. If a loved one comes to you and says, I want to try to get off the smoking thing, can you help me? Can you get me some of those e-cigarettes? At the very least, the reasoning is they'll be partaking in a less harmful habit than smoking. In the best case scenario, they'll get off it completely eventually. Well, why is that not a good thing? Why would you not encourage that if you have a a family member who is smoking cigarettes. 663-1270. And was it really necessary to release all that yucky information about what was floating around in Carrie Fisher's system? Where is the public benefit here? What purpose does it serve? Obviously, somebody out there wants to know all this. Every time a story like this comes out, people fall all over themselves to condemn it. Yet they keep putting out the stories, which indicates to me there's a market for this somewhere. Somebody's demanding this information. You tell me, where's the benefit here? Number 663-1270, 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Supertalk 1270 and supertalk1270.com. If you look at the Supertalk 1270 website today, supertalk1270.com, you may notice, since it's being talked about, the Carrie Fisher story is conspicuous by its absence from the website. That was a deliberate call on my part. It actually came to me to decide whether this story should go up, and I said no. And very specifically, for all these reasons we're talking about, what purpose does it really serve to do so? Some more e-comments. Steve writes, nothing but sensationalism, not news. Another person's misfortune has become entertainment's news. Wally writes, okay, Wally. Wally writes, didn't see anything they might not find in my blood work. Thank you, Wally, for sharing that with us. Jerry writes, pointless, especially when she's already gone. Yeah, how many months has it been now? Carrie Fisher died, and this many months later, they got to make a big story out of it again. What's the point? Where is the point? Alan writes, it comes under the who gives a crap category. Like all choices on Facebook, you either ignore it and move on, or you comment. So that's the bottom line here, is to gather comments for some reason. Okay, Al. Paul writes, it attracts eyeballs, translating directly into advertising dollars. Andy writes, here's the larger question. Who cares about the drugs in Carrie Fisher's system? It demonstrates how obsessed we are as a culture with things that are not important. Well, some states, North Dakota is one, they do have laws restricting the kind of information that can be released to the public in the wake of an autopsy. Specifically, the law in North Dakota is to be released to the public, it has to serve some kind of purpose in the pursuit of justice. In other words, if it's part of an investigation, if there's a suspicion of foul play, or if it's part of a prosecution of somebody for killing the person, whatever. In that case, public need justifies releasing the information. Otherwise, you're very restricted here in North Dakota as to how much of this information you can release. But amazingly, there are people who think it shouldn't be that way. Some folks think that you're doing the world a favor if you tell everybody about, if you shame them, it's drug shaming. Tell everybody about all the drugs they were on. Yeah, drugs. Yeah, teach them a lesson. Well, in the case of Carrie Fisher, we know Carrie Fisher herself is very open about it, and her family's been very open about it. And that's one thing. If the family wants to say, yeah, Carrie was messed up, yeah, we hope everybody will maybe learn from her mistakes and do better for themselves. That's fine. That's cool. But it has to be the family's decision. That's up to them. Number here, 663-1270, 663-1270. Moving right along, let's see who else we can offend here. Well, it has to be said, this kid who went to North Korea, Otto Warbier, and he died. This has to be said, all right? This kid was an idiot for going to North Korea. Fine, I said it. What the hell do you expect when you go to a corrupt, anti-American, communist, third world country? You don't go to the land of 1984 and start walking around on the street ridiculing Big Brother. You just don't do it. And if your child or your grandchild, if they were to tell you, I'm going to visit North Korea, what would you tell them? Would you say, oh, okay, have fun. Take your Bible. Right? Yeah, sure you would. Yeah. And if something went wrong, who's to blame? I'll tell you who's not to blame is the current or former president of the United States. The father of this guy issued a statement last week in which he blamed, guess who? Yeah, Barack Obama for not doing more to get the kid out. And he gave credit to the current POTUS for doing so. Well, don't believe for 1 minute that the current president had anything to do with getting this kid out of North Korea. I'll tell you what happened. Here's what happened. You can bet your bottom dollar this is what happened. They got the kid and they roughed him up. And then at one point they said, oh, crap, he's going to die. We were too rough on him. We're going to lose this kid. He's going to die, and he's going to die on our watch. At which point Kim Jong-un or somebody in the upper echelons over there said, well, for the love of whoever, get him out of the country. We don't want him dying on our watch. Send him back to America. If he's going to die, he'll die over there. Then we can maybe blame it on the healthcare system or whatever. So that's what they did. You can bet your bottom dollar. That's how these countries work. Don't believe for 1 minute it had anything to do with the great work of our great and glorious leader, whoever the leader is. And really, whose fault is it if you go to a country like this, one of 3 countries on the planet that does not have diplomatic relations with the United States of America? You know, that's a pretty good indication. If there are 3 countries out of the, 200 countries around the globe, you got 3 countries that don't have diplomatic relations with us. Every little tin pot dictatorship in the world has relations with the United States of America, except for 3, and North Korea is one of them. Isn't that a pretty good sign that maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be a good idea to go here? But no. The kid went, and what happened, happened. And yes, it's a shame it happened. But he went there of his own volition, got himself in trouble. They brought him back. He was probably dying anyway when he came back. And the father blames the former president of the United States for not doing enough to get him out. Well, what was he doing over there to begin with? Now, you go to a place like that, despite all the warnings, you take your own chances, booby. Seriously. If you got a kid who wants to maybe go to Mexico for spring break, you tell them to be careful. What would you tell your kid if they wanted to visit a country like North Korea? Hell, if a kid goes to Canada, you sit them down and you tell them, now, look, they got laws there. Some of the laws are different. You have to respect the laws. If you get in trouble there, we can't necessarily get you out. This, that, and the other. You warn them. You advise them. You don't just sit back and let them do it and then, blame the powers that be for this kid getting in trouble. Do you? 663-1270. Remember back in the 70s, they had these public service ads on television about kids, college students, young adults, getting busted in other countries. Back then, it was in the context of drugs. You get busted in a place like Turkey or even Mexico or wherever. And because these kids were going over there and they were bringing their drugs with them and they get caught with the drugs and they get in serious trouble. Some of these countries have death penalties for people using drugs. And what was the big lesson? If you get busted over there, you're in big trouble, man. We can't just pull you out of there. We can't just rescue. Whatever happened to that mentality? Whatever happened to the conservative notion of taking responsibility for your own actions. Apparently that doesn't apply anymore. But you got to be responsible for your own actions. If you or a family member wants to go to any country in the world, you tell them, sit them down, look, get to know the way things are done in that part of the world. When in Rome, yada, 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 right? Now, some comments on this. Let's see here from the website. From Kevin, who writes, who goes to North Korea anyway? WTF. True. What was that guy doing there in the first place? It's terrible what happened to him. However, all the places in the world to go, he chose North Korea. Dope. And then gets over there and tears down a poster. Yeah. Tears down a poster of Kim Jong-un or whatever, and they wonder why he gets in trouble. Yeah, it's Obama's fault. Right, sure. Jenny writes, here's Jenny. A humanitarian group I used to work for sent an entire delegation of musicians to perform in Pyongyang at their spring festival. And they have people go there for humanitarian purposes. Well, I'm sure they do, Jenny, and that's fine. But I'm sure at some point they sat them down and they vetted them big time. And they told them what to expect and what they had to do or not do in order to stay out of trouble. That's reasonable. That hopefully is what you would do if it was your family member saying, I'm going to go to North Korea. I don't know. 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. More conversation, your calls coming up.
Currently 70 degrees.
Here's Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons on Super Talk 1270.
Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. So this kid from Ohio, Otto, whatever his name was, he goes to North Korea. He gets in trouble. He gets roughed up. They send him back. He died. And that's okay. That's too bad. I feel for the family. But really, whose fault is it? Your kid comes to you and says, Dad, I want to go to North Korea for spring break. What do you say to something like that? You say, oh, okay, son, you pat him on the head. Okay, be sure and take your Bible. They love when you take your Bible. Right, sure. By the way, that's actually true. Apparently, there was another case in North Korea of somebody who got in trouble for bringing a Bible with him. Well, again, what do you expect? He's trying to martyr himself, I guess, for the Christian cause. Right. Sure. Yeah, you want to martyr yourself? Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Keep me out of it. 663-1270. So the kid got in trouble in North Korea. He died. Whose fault is it? Well, the question should be ridiculously obvious. Apparently it isn't. Some more comments here. Let's see. I don't think it's really fair to say it so callously. I don't know. That's callous. Just saying. He went over there and doing what he did and being there to begin with. It was pretty stupid. Yes, it was stupid. But he most definitely did not deserve what happened to him. Well, that's kind of not the point. Nobody deserves to have that happen to him, but you try in life not to put yourself in positions where that kind of thing can happen. It's called self-preservation. It's called common sense, which ain't so common anymore. Another similar comment here. I get what you're saying, but he was young and foolish, as we all have been. Clearly, the problem lies in North Korea. He's not a hero. No, he's not. But I just don't take the loss of human life lightly. And what they did was wrong. Well, we're kind of talking in circles here. Again, the point is he did what he did, and he should have, going over there, he should have realized that, okay, taking my own life into my own hands here. Oh, what did his father tell him before he went? What would you tell your kid? That's the question. 663-1270. And then there's a couple of comments here about, nuking North Korea and all that, whatever. Kind of missing the point here. The point is not about how. Yeah, North Korea is a pretty horrible place. So why the hell would you go there to begin with? I don't know. Moving onward and upward. Number here is 663-1270. You can check out the website, too. A lot of great stories on the website. You will not find, however, the story of Carrie Fisher. Didn't put that one on the website for the reasons we've previously discussed. But it's supertalk1270.com. Your comments are welcome at any time. Have you noticed more and more restaurants are starting to prompt you as to how much to leave for tips? You go into a restaurant and you get your receipt, or maybe it's up at the pay terminal. But let's say most often, you see it probably at the bottom of the receipt, that some of them are suggesting higher tips like 20%, 30%, even more in some cases. Well, apparently there's a name for it. It's tip shaming. Yeah, it's a thing. And the idea is if you leave less than the lowest number, which is usually like 15%, anything below 15 is considered stiffing the guy, right? Well, what do you think will happen? Your server will be unhappy. Well, maybe the server should be unhappy. I tend to tip well. I notice in North Dakota, I notice in Bismarck, the standard around here is a little higher than it is elsewhere in the country. The standard around the country is 15%. The standard here seems to be 20%. And that's fine. When in Rome, do like a Roman. But where do they get off trying to shame you into tipping more than what's appropriate? Got a story here about a guy, he took his cats to get groomed. He had 2 cats. And he took them in for bathing, clipping, and shaving. And then when he went to pay for it, the receipt had the thing on it whether he wanted to tack on the tip. And here are the options he was given: 20, 25, or 30%. Well, 20 is standard, or maybe a little high. But 25 or 30? Come on. It was not explained why he needed to tip or to whom. And as it turned out, the guy didn't tip at all. Now, generally, you know how tipping works. It's pretty obvious. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. The idea that the waiter is almost like an independent contractor as a liaison between you and the restaurant. That's actually a good attitude to take if you're waiting tables. It's like you're kind of in business for yourself almost. And your job is to kind of broker between the customer and the restaurant to serve the food, make sure they get the food served properly and everything else. And you get tipped, hopefully, in response. But now you've got these pre-calculated tipping options, and you've got apps. There's an app called Square. It was developed by the guy who founded Twitter, Jack Dorsey. And you go into a restaurant or a store or wherever for service, and you get prompted for these tips. You get prompted in unfamiliar circumstances, like you go in to buy a boat for something, and they say, you're going to tip the guy who sold you the boat? No. And then they give you these weird options, like in the 20, 25, 30% range. You see more and more of that. It's tip inflation, I suppose. But here's the thing. The original app, Square, the one that the Twitter guy developed, the default setting for the app for amounts over $10 are like no tip, 15%, 20%, 25%. Those are the default settings for the app. So if you go out to eat somewhere and you're seeing 20, 25, and 30%, that is something that the owner of the business came up with on their own. Don't fall for that. The business owners, they have every right to ask for whatever tip they deem appropriate, but you in turn, you have every right to say No. It's a good question. Would you voluntarily pay a higher amount for anything just because you were given the option to do so? Hopefully you wouldn't. Although with all the scams going around these days around this part of the country, it does kind of make one wonder, doesn't one? I don't know. Love to get your comments. Supertalk1270.com. Your comments are welcome and appreciated anytime. In the meantime, keep in touch with us through the website. And I'll be back soon for more of the same old shoot 'em up and the same old rodeo. Jim Walsh for Supertalk 1270. Happy summer, by the way. As of this hour, this very hour, it is now officially summertime in North Dakota. Enjoy it. Bye.